Have you ever reached the point where you believed one more sunset would be your last chance to keep going? On the lonely plains of Montana in the autumn of 1889, a young woman stood at the edge of despair, holding the only person she had left in this world. Before dawn arrived, a quiet rancher would make a decision that neither of them could ever forget, and one simple act of compassion would change 3 lives, if forever. Stay until the end, because this journey is filled with hope, courage, and a love born from kindness when it was needed most. Before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to Nordic Love Stories. Every like and every subscription helps us continue sharing heartfelt Western stories about faith, love, and second chances. The evening sky glowed with deep shades of amber as the last sunlight stretched across the endless prairie. Emma Brooks tightened her faded grey shawl around her shoulders while cradling her 4-year-old daughter, Lily, whose tiny hands clung tightly to her mother's neck. For nearly 3 weeks, they had travelled from one settlement to another after losing the small farm Emma and her late husband had struggled for years to build. A terrible drought had destroyed their crops, debts had taken their land, and after her husband passed away from a sudden illness, there had been nothing left except an old wagon, a few worn clothes, and the determination to keep Lily alive. That determination was beginning to fade. Every ranch she visited already had enough workers. Every boarding house refused to take in a widow without money. Every hopeful morning ended with another painful rejection. Emma had stopped asking strangers for mercy because disappointment hurt more than hunger. She sat beside a lonely cottonwood tree near the trail, sharing the final apple between herself and Lily while pretending she had already eaten earlier that day. Lily smiled innocently and offered the last bite back to her mother, but Emma gently kissed her forehead and whispered that mothers never stayed hungry for long. It was a comforting lie born from love. As darkness slowly covered the prairie, the cold wind carried dust across the empty road. Emma looked toward the distant hills and wondered if sleeping beneath the open sky had simply become their future. She quietly closed her eyes, praying not for wealth or comfort, but only for enough strength to protect her little girl through another freezing night. Far across the valley, rancher Nathan Reed guided his black horse along the familiar trail leading home after delivering supplies to a neighboring town. At 35 years old, Nathan had become known as a fair and honest cattleman, whose word carried more value than most contracts. Few people knew the loneliness hidden behind his calm expression. 5 years earlier, he had buried his young wife after a deadly fever swept through the territory. Since then, he had poured every ounce of his energy into building his ranch, convincing himself that hard work could silence grief. Yet every evening, when the sun disappeared behind the mountains, the silence inside his cabin reminded him that success meant little without someone to share it with. As Nathan rode through the fading light, he noticed movement beneath the cottonwood tree. Most travelers would have passed without stopping, assuming another weary family was simply resting before continuing their journey, but something about the little girl's frightened eyes and the exhausted expression on her mother's face refused to let him ride away. He slowed his horse, climbed down without making a sound, and approached carefully so he would not frighten them. Emma immediately stood, pulling Lily gently behind her. "We're sorry," she said quietly. "We'll leave if this land belongs to you." Nathan removed his hat and answered with calm respect. "This land belongs to no one but the Lord. You don't have to leave." Emma lowered her eyes, embarrassed by how quickly she had apologized. Nathan noticed the nearly empty canteen, the patched suitcase, the worn-out boots, and the trembling hands trying so hard to appear strong. He understood hardship, without needing to hear every detail. "Have you eaten today?" he asked softly. Emma hesitated before giving the same answer she had repeated to strangers for days. My daughter has. Nathan glanced at Lily, whose tired face revealed more truth than words ever could. Without another question, he opened one of his saddlebags and handed Emma fresh bread, smoked beef, cheese, and a small jar of blackberry jam prepared by his elderly housekeeper. Emma stared at the food, unable to move. No one had offered kindness without expecting payment in return for a very long time. Tears quietly gathered in her eyes as Lily accepted the bread with both little hands and smiled brighter than the setting sun. Nathan simply smiled back, feeling warmth return to a heart that had been lonely for far too many years. Nathan waited quietly while Emma helped Lily finish the warm meal. He never hurried them, never asked uncomfortable questions, and never looked at them with pity. Instead, he watched the little girl laugh for the first time that evening as blackberry jam covered the corners of her tiny smile. It was a simple moment, but it reminded him how powerful even the smallest act of kindness could be. The cold wind grew stronger, and dark clouds slowly covered the moon. Nathan looked toward the horizon before speaking. A storm will be here before midnight. No child should spend a night like this outdoors. Emma tightened her grip on Lily. She wanted to trust him, but life had taught her that promises were often followed by disappointment. Sensing her fear, Nathan stepped back and spoke gently. "You don't owe me anything. My ranch has an empty guest cabin. Stay there until the weather clears. If you wish to leave tomorrow, I'll hitch my wagon and take you wherever you want to go." His calm voice carried no pressure, only honesty. Emma looked into his eyes and saw something she had not seen in months: sincerity. After a long silence, she nodded. Nathan carefully lifted their worn suitcase into his wagon, while Emma wrapped Lily inside a thick wool blanket he offered. The little girl quickly fell asleep, safe and warm against her mother's shoulder. They traveled beneath the dark sky as distant thunder rolled across the Montana hills. The trail wound through open grasslands, across a shallow creek, and finally toward a peaceful valley where lanterns glowed beside a large wooden ranch house. Horses rested quietly inside sturdy fences, cattle grazed beneath tall cottonwood trees, and smoke drifted from the stone chimney. Emma could hardly believe such a peaceful place existed after weeks of endless roads. Nathan opened the door to a small guest cabin standing a short distance from the main house. Inside, a cheerful fire already burned in the fireplace. A rocking chair stood beside the hearth. Fresh blankets rested neatly on a wooden bed, and a small table held warm stew, homemade bread, and hot tea prepared by Mrs. Margaret, the elderly cook who had cared for Nathan's ranch since he was a young man. When Margaret saw Emma and Lily, she welcomed them with a gentle smile instead of curious questions. "You must both be freezing," she said kindly. "Eat first. Everything else can wait until morning." Emma's eyes filled with tears once again. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to be welcomed instead of judged. That night, after Lily fell asleep beneath warm blankets, Emma sat quietly beside the fire. Nathan stopped by the doorway, only to make sure they had everything they needed. "Thank you," Emma whispered. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Nathan looked toward the glowing fire before answering. "Years ago, when grief nearly destroyed me, someone reminded me that kindness only has value when it's given freely. I never forgot those words." Emma realized he carried old wounds of his own. For the first time since losing her husband, she spoke honestly about her fears, her failures, and the endless road that had brought her there. Nathan listened without interrupting. He offered no grand speeches, only understanding. Sometimes being heard is the greatest comfort a broken heart can receive. The next morning, Emma woke before sunrise. She could not bear the thought of accepting generosity without giving something in return. While Lily still slept peacefully, Emma swept the porch, collected fresh eggs, cleaned the kitchen, and prepared breakfast using the ingredients Margaret showed her. When Nathan returned from feeding the horses, the smell of fresh biscuits and coffee filled the air. He smiled with quiet surprise. "You should have rested," he said. Emma shook her head with a shy smile. "Working reminds me that I still have something to offer." Nathan admired the quiet strength behind her words. After breakfast, he walked with Emma across the ranch, showing her the barns, vegetable garden, chicken coop, and orchard. Lily ran happily beside a gentle pony, laughing louder than Nathan had heard any child laugh on his ranch in years. Watching mother and daughter smile beneath the morning sun awakened something inside him that he believed had disappeared forever. As they stood overlooking the wide valley, Nathan turned toward Emma. "I've been needing someone honest to help manage the house and gardens. It isn't charity. It's honest work with fair pay, a safe home, and a future for you and Lily, if you're willing to stay." Emma stood speechless. She had spent weeks praying only for another chance to survive. Now, standing beneath the endless western sky, she realized that sometimes the road that seems to lead nowhere is quietly carrying us toward the place where a brand new life begins. Emma stood silently as Nathan's offer echoed through her heart. For weeks she had expected nothing from the world except another closed door. Yet here was a man offering honest work, safety and dignity instead of pity. She looked toward little Lily, who was laughing as the gentle pony nudged her shoulder with its nose. It was the happiest Emma had seen her daughter since they had lost their home. With tears shining in her eyes, she finally smiled and whispered, "If you'll have us, we'd be honored to stay." Nathan extended his hand, not as a rescuer, but as a partner welcoming a new beginning. "Then, welcome home," he said. From that day forward, life on Reed Ranch slowly changed. For everyone, Emma cared for the guest cabins, tended the vegetable garden, prepared meals alongside Margaret, and soon became someone the ranch hands respected for her kindness and determination. She never complained, even during the longest days, because every sunrise reminded her how far she and Lily had come. Lily flourished in her new home. She fed chickens every morning, gathered wildflowers in the fields, learned to ride a gentle pony, and greeted every ranch hand with a cheerful smile. The once quiet ranch echoed with laughter again, something Nathan had not heard since losing his wife years before. Even Margaret noticed the difference. One evening she smiled at Nathan and softly said, "This house finally feels alive again." Nathan simply looked toward Emma and Lily sitting on the porch and quietly nodded. As the weeks turned into months, a deep friendship grew between Nathan and Emma. They shared long conversations after supper while watching the sun disappear behind the mountains. They spoke about dreams, painful memories, faith, and the future. Neither of them tried to replace the past. Instead, they helped each other believe that life could still hold happiness after heartbreak. One cold afternoon, disaster struck when a frightened herd broke through part of the northern fence after lightning frightened the horses. Several calves ran toward a steep ravine. Without hesitation, Nathan raced after them on horseback, while Emma organized the ranch hands and safely led the remaining animals into another pasture. Despite heavy rain and dangerous winds, she stayed calm and courageous. Working together, they rescued every animal before darkness covered the valley. Soaked by the rain, but grateful, Nathan looked at Emma with deep admiration. "You didn't just save this ranch today," he said. "You proved you're the strongest person I've ever known." Emma smiled through happy tears. "You saved us first. I simply protected the home you gave us." As winter arrived, the ranch became known throughout the valley as a place where no hungry traveler was turned away. Emma insisted every visitor receive a warm meal before continuing there. journey because she never forgot the nights when strangers had refused to help her. Nathan gladly supported her idea, believing kindness should always continue from one person to another. Months later, during the town's annual harvest celebration, Nathan invited Emma and Lily to walk with him beneath hundreds of glowing lanterns hanging across the wooden streets. Music filled the cool evening air while families laughed together. Nathan stopped beside the old chapel where wildflowers bloomed even in late autumn. Looking into Emma's eyes, he removed a small velvet box from his coat. Inside rested a simple silver ring. "You brought light back into a house I believed would stay empty forever," he said quietly. "Emma Brooks, would you honor me by becoming my wife and allowing Lily to become my daughter?" Tears rolled down Emma's cheeks before she answered, "Yes, with all my heart." Little Lily clapped with excitement and threw her tiny arms around Nathan, laughing. "Does this mean I finally get to call you Papa?" Nathan knelt, hugged her tightly, and smiled through tears. "Only if you'd like to." "I've wanted to for a long time," Lily whispered. 1 year later, the lonely ranch had become the happiest home in the valley. Love replaced grief, laughter replaced silence, and every traveler who arrived at their gate found warmth instead of rejection. Emma often remembered the evening she had believed hope was gone forever. She realized that the greatest blessings sometimes arrive quietly, carried not by riches, but by compassion. Nathan discovered that opening his heart had healed wounds no amount of hard work ever could. Their story became a reminder throughout the frontier that one act of kindness can rescue far more than a single life. It can create an entire future. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to Nordic Love Stories, and share it with someone who needs hope today. Remember, the smallest act of kindness may become the beginning of someone else's forever.